Good afternoon, and welcome back to the Extraordinary Technology Conference 2017. Today we're hearing about hydrogen from a lot of different people, and to round that out, we are going to be hearing from the veritable godfather of the hydrogen work. He's actually moved into some amazing fields. I want to tell a quick story before Bob comes up here. A number of years back, I was working with some crazy researchers in Colorado Springs, and we were building a hydrogen device, and they were in communication with somebody back east, and we were just having a devil of a time making everything work. And so I took the hydrogen device, threw it into the trunk of my car. I had $20 on my credit card and $200 cash in my pocket, and I drove from Colorado all the way out to see Bob. I stayed with him for a solid week, and it just blew my mind. We had just an amazing time. We built things, we did experiments, and it was just he was just so accessible and open, and just an amazing person with an amazing array of experiences and resources in his mind to pull from. So I would like you to give a warm welcome to Bob Boyce.
Thank you, Bernard. Many of you already know me from last year. My name is actually Norman Boyce, but I go by Bob Boyce. My middle name is Robert. What I was going to bring in today, I wanted to start out with, because I wasn't expecting the Scalar topic, but I'm going to start out with that, since so much of what I do is related to that. Anyways, I started in the hydrogen technology. I can't go further back into that because it's classified, but the hydroxy gas technology is based on a catalytic gas generation, not electrolysis. And the power source for that, as you've probably seen out there, the 100-cell box uses a toroidal power transformer. The toroidal power transformer is driven by femtosecond transition time pulses. These pulses use a scalar potential when they all arrive onto the secondary. I'm going to advance. This is a diagram of something that probably everybody's heard of, PART, where you send radio waves up into the atmosphere, upper ionosphere, to heat the upper ionosphere. This is what's known as a scalar event. You got transmitter A, transmitter B, transmitter C, all in different locations, whether they're close to one another or not, all transmitting to the target. The phasing of the signals are set up so that when they arrive at the target, they are all in phase with one another, which gives you an amplified signal at the target. That's what heats the upper ionosphere, causes it to rise, creates an atmospheric lens for radio waves to bounce through. This project was started because the Department of the Navy, they wanted to have radio propagation that they could bring up on demand. If something happens to the satellite network, solar flare, what have you, then they can fall back on this. So that's what this technology was developed for, communications, not as a weather manipulation device. However, in testing, they found that it does do weather modification over when it's used over the target area. You can use it as a weapon. This is what goes on in the toroidal system. You've got three primaries, 10.7 kilohertz, 21.4 kilohertz, 42.8 kilohertz. All three are fed into primaries on a single toroid. There's a common secondary that's wound on that toroid. The signals are phased so that this is what you get on the output. You've got 1 times, 2 times, 3 times. These 2 times and 3 times are scalar potentials. There is no such thing as a scalar energy. Scalar is when you use an existing energy in a scalar event. So this creates a scalar events. It's these scalar events that put tension upon the water. Now, when we get into like the water smacker device, the battery smacker device, all of these use femtosecond pulsing. They create scalar events. These scalar events elicit a response in the non-Hertzian energy realm. It is this non-Hertzian energy realm that actually does the work. You have very little EMF realm input energy. The greater majority of the energy comes from the non-Hertzian realm. So when we use these devices, we're actually using non-Hertzian energy that's been entrained by the pulse train. I decided to build a battery charging system using a toroidal technology, and it worked. But there are limitations. First off, because of the frequencies involved, these aforementioned frequencies, it creates a field that extends out from the core. That field extends out for approximately 10 meters, a little over 30 feet, right? You put 2 units in proximity with one another, they interfere with one another. That's been a problem for scaling up any of this technology for more output, because they'll share the same energy within a given space, which is a problem. You can only tap so much energy. So what I was seeking was something with higher frequency. I wanted something that wouldn't interfere. So the latest technology, and I'm not going to give a whole lot of information on it, it's based on quantum resonance. We create quantum resonance into a crystal. We drive the crystal into excitation, very similar to a solid-state laser. When the crystal is excited, it emits energy. We use a gold substrate under the crystal when it's grown. They grow the crystal on the substrate, and then it's covered with gold to pull the energy off. This system, in order to really put out any power, has to be used with water, such as the 100-cell box or a battery system with lead-acid batteries. It needs to be something with water, because water accepts longitudinal energy. Electronics does not. So with the new technology, I wanted to convert that energy directly into electricity. The amount of direct electricity you can get from a toroidal system, we're talking about hundreds of milliamps per diode, and you can stack many of them in there to get more current, but you're only limited to the efficiency of the conversion. The diodes we use in the 100-cell box system, those were silicon carbide. Silicon carbide has very poor efficiency, 5 to 7%. So if you're trying to get direct electricity out of one of these things, you're not going to get a whole lot of it. You get more energy by putting it to water, where the water will absorb the energy, and you can get up to 3,600 watts of energy out of a single toroid. So a new system that I'm not going to get too much into, one crystal we've measured at 4.6 to 4.7 amps. So we're talking about, with the toroidal type system, using the silicon carbide, you're only able to harvest, maybe, if you're lucky, 30% more than what you're putting to it, if you're not going to apply it to lead-acid batteries. I bought some crystals for testing, made in the US, by the way. And the crystals that I bought for testing, same substrate, gold. Germanium is the semiconductor material. And they were rated at 22% efficiency. It took 10 watts of drive, a quantum resonance drive, to drive these to excitation. We only achieved 13 watts of output. Well, I can do that with the toroidal system at a far less expense. I didn't give up. So I started looking around where I could get crystals that would do what I needed to do. I found a source in Germany. So I had some samples sent. They're very expensive, by the way. It's €1,000 for 1 unit and 250 euros shipping. So it costs quite a bit. But we were able to excite this at 8.5 watts. And we achieved 143 to 144 watts of output with 8.5 watts of drive. That's a game changer. So that's what I'm currently pursuing. I wanted to bring a demo here, but I just did not have the funding to get everything done in time to get to the show and bring it. I'm building an electric car. That's the chassis that we're showing here. The motor is on the transaxle. It's a 3-phase AC motor, about 16 horsepower continuous, 256 horsepower peak for about 15 seconds. When I tested this, I had 600 pounds of lead acid batteries on this thing, and it would wheelie with my weight on it and 600 pounds of batteries. That's what it looks like in a mock-up where we were test fitting the body. The front end was actually mounted and the doors in the rear were held on with clips. That's what it looks like in the back without the bumper. The bumper fills that space below. So I don't have a whole lot of material to put on the screen. I just have these 5 pictures. So mostly it's going to be interaction. What do y'all want to talk about?
What are the resonant frequencies of the crystal?
Quantum resonance, yeah. I can't divulge that, I'm sorry. There's some non-disclosure agreements involved, again, with the manufacturers of the crystals as well. Well, I'm not going to use lead acid because that would, I could just use the toroidal system for that. I'm going to be using lithium, lithium polymer, not polymer, lithium iron phosphate because they're safer than the lipos.
Lead acid, I thought you were able to also get a lot of long life out of the battery.
Yes, you can. But again, you're at that limit of 3,600 watts. With this, the quantum resonance technology, there's no limit. You can build essentially a system the size of a laptop that can power an electric car. But you still have to have the activation energy to run it. Once it's running, then if you tap energy from the output, you can keep it going, obviously. But I still want to have battery backup. What if something happens to the system? One thing about anything that's non-Hertzian related is the planet is covered with a grid. Most of us know that. Ley lines. You have peaks and you have nulls. As you're driving along, if you're watching the amp meter, you're going to be seeing it going up and down as you're driving through peaks and nulls. So if you're using that to power the vehicle, what happens when you enter a null and you don't have energy to go? You have to have batteries. That's just the nature of the energy.
Well, is
Yes.
it an issue that they get lower below 50% capacity, that they might fail? If you like, most electric cars can run them way down, and then it's a bad effect on that.
Well, the current state in lithium polymer, actually, with the issues with the crystals, the whiskers growing on the electrodes and penetrating the barriers, the plastic. Yeah, they grow through and they short out the cell. Then you end up with a overheat situation and failure.
Should be able to keep up ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have interference from other radio frequencies or with the resonance?
No. No. Yeah. Yeah. Any more questions?
When will somebody available?
I wish I could answer that. I don't know myself. I built the prototype system. I sent it out for independent verification, and everything checked exactly like I had tested. So these devices, the water smacker, this is the original water smacker. We advertised them as 1-watt device when we first came out. There's actually 2 Tesla coils in there that are operating as a scalar, to create a scalar event. If you understand what I'm talking about, you have 2 pulses going in and colliding and creating a scalar event. So if you measure the power, you're going to measure 1 watt, which is what the electrical consumption is, but you're not going to measure what the non-Hertzian output is that's actually going into the water. This is a pro model that I came out with that's for clinics, doctors, anyone that's interested in giving their patients charged water. We've had really good results. We've had, I myself have had great results with it, but we've had issues where you have fluid buildup, edema in the body, where it has actually reversed that because the water that it puts out is microclustered. So what that does is that allows it to go into the cells, flush out toxins. So as George Wiseman was mentioning, your body wants that water, not the typical city water or municipal water or even well water that doesn't have the same qualities. And so once you start taking care of your cells, they start taking care of you. Your health improves. If it doesn't work for you, yes? In this, there's actually 2 frequencies. There's one in the DC-DC converter, which isn't important. It can be between 200 and 300 kilohertz. The primary frequency that is important is the 7.5 hertz, the Schumann resonance center frequency. And the battery smacker, again, it's another product we brought out. The primary intent was to desulfate batteries, bring them back. As long as they're not physically damaged, it can remove sulfation from lead acid batteries. It also does a charge on the battery, and there's actually a control on there where you can adjust the amount of Hertzian output versus the amount of non-Hertzian output. It toggles between these 2 modes, transverse and non-Hertzian, so that you can desulfate and charge a battery. Now, it's a small device, but it's just to give a glimpse of what can be done with non-Hertzian technology.
What's the longest you've heard battery, lead acid batteries run?
Well, I had a set running for 15 years with the prototype. Yeah, but someone broke in and stole them back in 2013 while I was out in California. Trojan. I used L16H. Yeah. 435 amp hour, 6 volt.
What else does it do to the water besides microstructure? Does it do any?
It charges the water, so if the water is acidic, like most waters are, it can raise the pH. But it all depends upon the source water you're using. If your source water has chemicals in it or additives, that can affect how well it works. Distilled water does.
I'm going to ask everybody a favor so that everyone can hear the questions and also so that it can be recorded on the DVD. Anytime you want to interact with the speaker, just come on up here, and that way he only has to look for one place to see if somebody has a question. But if you have,
Yeah, I'm blinded by the lights here. I can't see very
if
good.
you have a quick comment or question, step up to the microphone, okay? And so that way everybody can hear the question.
You mentioned with that technology, with the Toroidal technology, that if there were multiple cars or users in the same region, there might be a limitation because they interfered with each other.
Yes.
And I thought I heard you say that, you can only draw so much energy right within that region, or it becomes depleted for everybody, which is really something interesting at a very fundamental level of what causes that limitation and how it is restored naturally if it goes back to one user. Tell us more about how you see that.
Okay. It's not that the region has a limitation on power, it's the technology that I'm using to tap into it. That's the limiting factor. You can draw more than that amount of power from a particular space. One thing of caution though, when you draw power, it flows to the location you're drawing it from. As Vernon, I think, is he here? Okay. We were doing some work out at my place, and we had a little bit of an issue with bringing in stormy weather into our region because we had so many systems running during that event that we were tuning. And we could really only get, obviously, full output on one unit at a time. But that's one of the downfalls, is if you draw on this non-Hertzian energy, it will impact the environment around you. So the most conscientious use of this technology is distributed around the planet, not concentrated in one location. Yes?
I had a question about inducing a scalar event in the secondary coil when you said you put three different frequencies in the primary. I gather there's a different phase relationship between the three. Can you, is it 30-30-30, or can you share that, or is that proprietary? The phase relationship between those three
You're talking about the
kilohertz signals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It depends upon what you're doing. In this particular system, we were using it for water. So,
Okay.
and during my experimentation back when I was doing the hydrogen research with the boats, I found that 42.8 was the center frequency
Yeah.
for the water's response.
Right.
And the purpose of the other two frequencies were to work in conjunction with that to create this scalar event. So you can actually do all three at 42.8, but you're not going to get the same response because it's additive. When you put them in phase, where their phasing is matched up, then it's no longer additive. It becomes additional.
Synergistic?
Yeah.
So it's even stronger.
Yeah. So these pulses, I think I should use a pointer for that. These pulses here at the top, that is 3 times the input. Because you have 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, they all add up. This is 2 times the input, and this is 1 times the input. So when you want to create a scalar event, which is what we wanted to do in the water to get this resonance response, then you're going to want to have higher impulse energy. You can also do the 3 together, all high, but what happens is you need a relaxation time for the water to recover for the next strike. Without that, I don't know if you looked at the Stan Meyer circuit, where you have a gating system that cycles through the pulses, so you end up with one scalar event, and then you have time in between.
And the
these scalar
timing
events.
is in the seconds or milliseconds?
Oh, it's milliseconds. Or
Milliseconds.
microseconds even.
Microsecond, even.
Yeah, it can be microseconds.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
You mentioned that if the car was going over ley lines, there would be a dip in the ability to create the power in the car.
Yes. There's peaks where you get more energy than normal, and then there's nulls where you get less energy than normal. And it also depends upon geographical region, elevation. There's many variables involved.
So the ley lines, in some sense, interact because it is itself a non-Hertzian.
Yes.
consciousness also is non-Hertzian.
Okay, I can go with that.
Does that imply that conscious state of being, may influence the ability of the devices to draw power?
Absolutely.
So
That's one point of, was it quantum physics, where the observer can affect the experiment. And if you do have an experiment set up that's really close on the edge, that can go either way, if and this has been done over and over again, if the person is convinced it's not going to work, it will fail. If the experimenter is convinced it's going to work, it will not fail so often. So the probabilities show that the observer affects the experiment.
Last question I had, is the water smacker available to anybody who wants to buy it?
Yeah, Brother Andrew carries these. I don't typically manufacture the products that I license out to sell. I assigned the licensing rights to somebody to manufacture and sell these. Bro Andrew here, he provides these. He's been pretty low on inventory lately because the demand is so high on them. He does not have the professional water smacker yet, at least I haven't brought it to him to start making these. They're a lot more finicky, a lot more powerful, and a lot more expensive to make. So I have these modules made for me, and I have to order them in large quantities in order to be able to even get them. So it's quite costly to have these things made. Most people don't understand when you want something that's non-Hertzian related. You have to try to, talk to them in transverse terms and say, just build it. I'll take care of making it work. Anyone else? Hey, Tom.
I was wondering, Bob, if you would comment on the possibility of the Wardenclyffe Tower. If you view that as a possible scalar type antenna, and whether Tesla was actually setting up scalar waves or non-Hertzian longitudinal waves with that.
He was actually using that for a transmission point to transmit energy from. That was his intent anyways. He had a tower in Colorado Springs, which is where he sent the power for his car.
Oh.
That he had built an electric, well, he didn't build it, he had it built for him, that he was transmitting power to with his wireless transmission electricity. And I wanted to get into what happened with Nikola Tesla. Good thing you brought that up. Nikola Tesla was trying to do the right thing for everybody. And he was working with some people that weren't so savory. J.P. Morgan was funding him. J.P. Morgan was told by his advisor that Nikola Tesla wanted to give away free electricity. That wasn't the case. Nikola Tesla set up a power transmitting system